Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's wonderful to see all of you here in our beautiful Knesset Israel sanctuary. We truly do fill a room with a sense of community when we come together. We're also grateful for those folks who can join us via live stream. You're welcome remotely, virtually, as well as in person, and we're glad that we can all be together. Good Shabbos. I want to just take a moment and first let me tell you about tonight's service. Usually, during our service, we would have a series of prayers, and in the middle there'd be a Devar Torah, a little teaching that I would offer that was based on the week's Torah portions. I'm not going to do that tonight. Yay! No, I'm not going to do that tonight because I want to make sure that our service is a little bit shorter because we have a wonderful guest, our scholar in residence, Professor Lewis Gordon, who I'm going to introduce more formally in a little while, who's here with us at our service. And after we conclude with Kaddish, we're going to actually listen to remarks that we're going to engage in learning with Professor Gordon, and then we will conclude with an oneg following that. I hope that you're as excited about this as I am, because I've been really looking forward to learning with Professor Gordon for many, many months, for years, really. Yeah. I want to invite you to just take a breath. Close your eyes. Invite in Shabbat. Breathe it in. Feel that extra soul that we're granted on Shabbat. Feel it. Fill the space where you've been keeping all your worries of the week, all your cares and burdens. Feel it enter you. Feel it enliven you. Shabbat is a time not to create, but to be present to the wonder of creation. To sit and be with the world that has been created around us and the work of our hands as we have created all throughout this long week. And now we take our next footsteps to the edge of Shabbat, the week now behind us, as we join together in the singing of Shalom Aleichem, page 24.
Elyon, mi melech, מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. לה 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 מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. לה 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 לה
We continue welcoming Shabbat with the lighting of Shabbat candles, with Kiddush, with Motzi. It's my pleasure to call forward Elise and Gary Kaskowitz and Sarah Kaskowitz and Dan Leonore to lead us in these blessings. I'd also like to do something a little different. You guys can come up. But I also want to invite Alex Milanich, our educational director and rabbinical intern, forward. While I was, some of you may know that I was recently away at a, please make your way. I was recently away at a conference, and I did a lot of learning and got a lot of goodies and stuff. One of the things that I got, which isn't such a goodie as much as a hopefully meaningful, is we were given a set of candles, blue Shabbat candles, and we're encouraged to light them on Shabbat before the Shabbat candles in honor of one of the hostages. And there's a hostage assigned to each set of candles. So I nabbed 3 of them. So for 3 weeks, I'd like to do this ritual. But Alex is going to begin by sharing a reading as well as the name of the hostage we're remembering.
Shabbat Shalom. So tonight we are lighting candles in memory of Orrin Golden, who was 34 years old. And we share the words of Psalm 121. A song for ascents. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Lord is your guardian. The Lord is your protection at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. The Lord will guard you from all harm. He will guard your life. The Lord will guard your going and coming now and forever.
I'm going to ask Alex to light the blue candles. We're lighting these before the regular Shabbat candles because, of course, traditionally when we light Shabbat candles, Shabbat has begun and then we're not lighting a new candle. So in a moment, we'll continue with our regular ritual.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotah v'tzivanu le'adlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallow us with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the light of Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Okay.
Kiddush can be found on page 5.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kadsho, b'ahava uvratzon, hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila, lemikrae kodesh, zecher litziat mitzrayim, kivanu v'charta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kadshecha Be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabbat. L'chaim. Sarah and Daniel, you want to take the cover off and lead us in Motzi?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen. So while Daniel and Sarah and Sarah's parents enjoy some challah, and you can come get some a little later, we're going to take a minute. In a moment, we're going to be greeting the Sabbath Queen, the Sabbath Bride, with the singing of Lecha Dodi. But before we do that, we have a custom here at Knesset Israel to take a moment to greet one another first. So please turn to the people around you, wish one another a Shabbat Shalom, and don't be afraid to get up, cross the aisle, especially make a point of meeting someone you haven't met before. We'll join back together in a few moments.
It's almost like when they pass the Torah around during Torah services, how that kind of has a little mini schmoozing time.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yes.
I said to Z before, I wonder how long this part's going to be.
It's time and oh, I'm very. We're all just panicking.
Karen, I'm going to see Turned Up tomorrow at the Met. So excited. Of course, the bus leaves at 7:30. And it's the St. Patty's Day parade is tomorrow. I'm steering clear of Fifth Avenue.
My dad nice. He responded to me on Twitter one time. Really? Yes. He wished me a happy Thanksgiving or something because I was working during the pandemic. He said like stay safe or something. I got like a picture, a screenshot of it somewhere.
If we could come back together, we're gonna join together on page 20. It's poppin' here tonight. It's poppin'. It's shapoppin'. We are going to continue with Lecha Dodi, which can be found on page 20. We'll sing through verses 1, 2, 5, and 9, and Z will lead us with our wonderful professional and our volunteer choir, who we are very excited to have with us tonight. On our final verse, as is our custom, we rise and face the door to welcome in the Sabbath bride. Page 20.
Dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat, nekavela. Likrat dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat, nekavela.
Shamor
v'zachor v'dibor echad, Ishmianu elam yuchad, Adonai echad u'shemo echad, V'shemo tiferet v'letiva, Lecha dodi, likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat, nekavela. Lecha dodi, likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat, nekavela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki mekor habracha, merosh mikedem nesuka, sof ha'aseh b'machash v'tila. Lecha dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekavela. Lecha dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekavela. Hitoreri, hitoreri, ki vorek umiori, uri, uri, shir daveri, kivod Adonai alayik nila. Lecha dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekavela. Lecha dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekavela. Boi v'shalom ateret bala, gam b'simcha u'tzola, toch emunei am sugula, boi d'Allah, boi d'Allah. Lecha dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekavela. Lecha dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekavela.
We remain standing, but you may turn around. We'll continue with Baruch Hu, the opening of which can be found in your insert. The Hebrew is in transliteration in the insert as well, or you can follow along with the Hebrew portion on page 28.
Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Do you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? In the early dawn, in the dark of night, when I turn to you, may I see the light. Will I finally know? Can you let me see? Can you help me find all the best in me? With an open heart, I
We continue together on the bottom of page 31. This is an hour of change. Within it, we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it, we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael, amcha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta.
Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael Amcha ahavta Torah u'mitzvot Chukim u'mishpatim Otanu limadta Al kin Adonai Eloheinu b'shochbenu ובקומנו נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו, ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגי יומם ולילה, נגי יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael, ohev amo Yisrael.
We join with Z in the Shema on page 34.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malkuto Leolam Va'ed.
You may be seated. Page 36.
ושפחה ובחומך, וקשרתם להוד על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין ידיך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם כמו מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתיכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Adonai Elohechem Emet. We join together on the top of page 39. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות, אוסף אלה, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות, אוסף אלה.
מלכותך ראובניך, בוקי הים לפני משה ומרים, זה לי ענו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר, כי פדה אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, גל ישראל. Tonight we'll join together in an interpretive Hashkivenu entitled, O Guide My Steps. It can be found on page 373.
Oh, guide my steps and help me find my way. I need your shelter now. Rock me in your arms and guide my steps, and help me make this day a song of praise to you. Rock me in your arms and guide my steps. Ufros alenu, sukat shlomecha. Ufros alenu,
We continue with Yismachu, which can be found on page 44.
ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת, ישמחו במלכותך קורא עונג, ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת, ישמחו במלכותך קורא עונג. המקרשי שביעייה כולם ישמחו יתענגו מטובך והשביעי רצית בה וקידשת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת, ישמחו במלכותך וקוראי עונג, ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת, ישמחו במלכותך וקוראי עונג. כן ימינותו קראת, זכר למעשה, זכר למעשה בראשית. כן דת ימינותו קראת, זכר למעשה, זכר למעשה בראשית. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת, ישמחו במלכותך וקוראי עונג, ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת, ישמחו במלכותך וקוראי עונג.
We rise for the Amidah, which can be found on page 46.
Adonai sefetai tiftach ufi agite ilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'emotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Leah, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, Elyon, Kol Mel Chasadim Tovim, Venukei Hakol, Vesofer Haseot Beimahot, Umevii Gvura Levinei Venahem, Leman Shmo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshia u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh hakol atah raf roshia, Moshiv haruach u'morid hagashem, Mechalkei ha'im bechesed, Mechayeh hakol berachamim rabim, Somech noflim vechafei cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato, Lishenei afar, Michamocha be'agevurot, Umedoch melach, Melech memid umechayeh, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום הלכו הסלע. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh.
You may be seated as we continue on page 55 at the top together. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Together on the top of page 57. Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu bi'amcha Yisrael, utfilatam be'ahava tekabel, utehi l'ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha. Ever-present one, may we, your people Israel, be worthy in our deeds and our prayer, wherever we live, wherever we seek you, in this land, in Zion restored, in all lands. You are our God, whom alone we serve in reverence. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otcha levadcha b'yirah na'avod. It's at this point in our Amidah that we turn to the Hoda'ah prayer, the prayer for giving thanks. Hoda'ah, if you can hear it, is related to the word todah, which is how you say thanks in modern Hebrew. And it's our custom here at KI, instead of beginning the prayer, Modim Anachnu Lach, the beginning of the Hoda'ah prayer, with those words and continuing on, we instead take a moment for each of us to think of something for which we are personally grateful. Maybe it's something that you're always thinking about when you think about gratitude, or maybe it's something you haven't noticed in a while, but that really is a blessing. Maybe it's something from a long time ago, or something from very recent. Perhaps it's something in the future. But I want to invite everybody to just hold in your mind one thing, at least, for which you're grateful. And in a moment, I'm going to invite anybody who wants to share aloud what they're grateful for, briefly, to raise your hand, and I'll bring you the microphone. Nobody has to do this. In fact, we could have nobody do it. It would still be okay. But when somebody does offer something for which they're grateful, we say together as a community, we give you thanks. In Hebrew, we say, Modim Anachnu Lach. Nora.
Brothers.
Modim Anachnu Lach.
I am thankful to see our volunteer choir and hear them sing as well, up close and personal.
Modim Anachnu Lach. Please.
7 healthy grandchildren.
Modim Anachnu Lach.
I'm grateful that we have a guest speaker this weekend and that we are partnering with a Reformed congregation and a conservative congregation are partnering to invite him to speak.
Modim Anachnu Lach. It can be done. Crystal.
The coming of spring.
Modim Anachnu Lach.
My son traveled back from Africa safely.
Oh, Modim Anachnu Lach.
It was the most beautiful sunset tonight.
Modim Anachnu Lach.
I'm grateful that my son Mike was able to make the trip down here safely from Maine.
Modim Anachnu Lach.
This wonderful person that I get to marry in a few months and her wonderful family who is very kindly made me a part of the family already.
Modim anachnu lach. Now, you came down, but I will go up. Yeah, okay.
I'm grateful that my son, our president, is well enough to be with us tonight.
Modim anachnu lach.
The opportunity over Passover coming up to go see my uncle in Arizona.
Modim anachnu lach.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to have fed two very dear, important old friends tonight who have, for so many years, fed and nourished my body and soul.
Modim anachnu lach.
I'm grateful that our daughter, son-in-law, and two oldest grandchildren are here from California with us tonight.
Modim anachnu lach. I'm grateful that my son Elijah, who many of you heard of but thought I was kidding, who lives in Texas, is here to visit for just a few days. There he is. He's real. Modim anachnu lach. Okay, if you didn't share anything aloud, that's fine. But I want to just ask you to take that thing that you thought of, that you're grateful for, and just kind of hold it in your mind for a moment. As we say together, Modim anachnu lach. We pray silently.
Ose shalom, shalom bimramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Amen. Ose shalom, shalom bimramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'al kol Yisrael. Shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
We're going to prepare in a moment to offer a prayer for healing. But before we do, I want to also take a moment to remember that which is heavy in many of our hearts, and that is the state of Israel, the people of that land, and all the suffering that is occurring in the conflict that has already been too long. I want to invite us to join together in a prayer, Shalom, Shalom, Yerushalayim, the words of which can be found on your insert.
Shalom, Shalom, Yerushalayim. Shalom, Shalom, Yerushalayim. Shalom, Shalom, Yerushalayim. Yishlayu havayich. Shalom, 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 Yirah. Shalom, Shalom, Beyameinu. Shalom, Shalom, Yerushalayim. Shalom, Shalom, Yerushalayim. Shalom, Shalom, Yerushalayim. Shalom, Shalom, Shalom.
Many recent weeks we've been appending to our healing list the names of those who are still held in captivity in Gaza. The truth is, those of you who've been here, you've noticed, is it's a very long list. But the list that I actually have is a much longer list, and it includes those who have been released so that we might pray for their recovery. And so tonight, just to add that into the mix, I'm going to invite Alex forward to share the names of those who truly are in the process of recovering in so many ways.
Ada Sagi, Adi Shoham, Adina Moshe, Agam Almag Goldstein, Aisha Alziadna, Alma Orr, Amit Susana, Amit Shani, Anucha Angekau, Avigal Idan, Aviv Katz Asher, Aviva Siegel, Bancha Kongmani, Bilal Al-Ziadna, Bun Tham Phan Kong, Budi Sangbun, Chalmer Chai Sankau, Chana Perry, Chen Alma Goldstein, Clara Marmon, Daphne Al-Yakim, Daniel Aloni, Dietze Hyman, Mia Shem, Mika Engel, Mangkul Fadrabun, Moran Stella Yanai, Natafan Anakau, Nathawari Mulkan, Nabe Shoham, Neely Margalit, Noam Avigdori, Noam Orr, Noga Weiss, Owat Suri Yasri, Ophelia Reitman, Ophir Engel, Ofri Brodetz, Ohad Munder, Or Yaakov, Ori Megdish, Pavun Ratnil, Hatanayuth Sokri, Fonsawan Pinakalo, Mia Leinberg, Ra'aya Rotem. Daron Katz Asher, Eitan Yahalomi, Ella El Yakim, Elma Avraham, Amelia Aloni, Emily Hand, Emma Conillo, Erevs Calderon, Fernando Shimon Marmon, Gabriela Leinberg, Gal Almo Goldstein, Gali Tashansky, Gaelinor Jimmy Liano Pacheco, Hagar Broditz, Hannah Katzier, Ilana Gutsuski, Irina Tati, Itai Regev, Jakrapan Sekena, Karina Engelbart, Karen Munder, Chomrit Chombua, Kitsak Top Pati, Kong Sa'aleo, Liam Orr, Liat Benin Atsili, Louis Har, Mani Jirachat, Margalit Bertha Moses, Maya Regev, Mirav Tal, Raz Asher, Raz Ben-Ami, Ramon Buchstab Kirst, Ron Kravoy, Ruthie Munder, Sahar Calderon, Santi Bunfrom, Sapir Cohen, Shani Gorin, Sharon Aloni Konio, Sharon Avigdori, Shiri Weiss, Shoshan Haran, Serene Kansugonin, Tal Almog Goldstein, Tamar Metzger, Uriah Broditz, Uthai Sengunuan, Uthai Thunsri, Vetun Fum, Wichai Kalapat, Wishan Temthong, Withun Fumi, Yafa Adar, Yagil Yaakov, Yahel Shoham, Yarden Roman Gat, Yelena Trupanab, Yuli Konio, Yuval Broditz, Yuval Engel.
We link their names to the names of those in our community here, closer to home, and in our lives who are in need of healing. We think of Shana Albert, Robert Alexander, Mac Beeson, Kitty Berger, Gershona Binyamina Batsar Valevi, Chaya Shana Dinka Bat Esther Basha Yosef, Ellery Einstein, David Eiskowitz, Rivka Elka Bat Root, Jacob Ellis, Marianne Gardosky, Francis Gentlecore, Jamie Gordon Rodriguez, Mikhail Gordon, Harav Rachel Bat Frima, Emily Hochstedler, Nick Jelinski, Diane Levine, David Levine, Monica Manella, Dionisio Mistich, Wilbur Nichols, Felice Price, Eric Rappaport, Shavali Rosenberg, Dr. Norm Sarachek, Susan Scarce, Rose Schlossberg, Carrie Silver, Peggy Stetner, Sam Ungerleiter, and Ethel Zager, and Marcy Zolkos. With hope for healing in our hearts, we join together in the singing of Misha Berach, led by Lissa Scarce, on page 253.
Misha Berach Avoteinu Mekor HaBracha Leimoteinu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misha Berach Imoteinu Mekor HaBracha Leavoteinu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
May the source of blessing bring peace and wholeness to us all, soon in our day, as together we say, Amen. It's my pleasure at this time to call forward Charlie Hochstedler, a member of our board who's going to offer us some greetings and announcements, as well as Shabbat wishes. Yeah?
Good evening and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I would like to welcome Dr. Gordon Lewis and his wife, Jane, I believe also Dr. Jane Lewis.
It's okay. It's okay. We're all friends here. It's okay.
I do make mistakes once in a while. Okay, Dr. Lewis Gordon and Dr. Jane Gordon. I'll get that right someday. Seriously, thank you for joining us this evening. I would like to thank Karen and the lovely large choir for so many good voices and sharing your talents with us tonight. We have a number of opportunities to study and learn with Dr. Gordon this weekend, including in a short while this evening. Tomorrow morning, we will not have our normal Torah study. Oh. Maybe I should just sit down. We are canceling the Torah study that we usually have on Saturday mornings to continue our time with Dr. Gordon at Congregation B'rith Shalom. We encourage those of you who have registered for the lunch and learn with Dr. Gordon to also attend the morning service there. The service begins at 9 a.m., the luncheon at 11:45. Tomorrow evening, starting at 7 p.m., we'll have Havdalah and dessert here, followed by a lecture and a discussion. And then we will complete the weekend with Dr. Gordon Saturday morning at 10 a.m. for a brunch and learn. I'm sure it's just the glasses. I need a new prescription. Honestly, I've done this better before. Actually, it is easier without the glasses. I would like to mention that Family Promise is still looking for an overnight host for Sunday, March 24th. We have most of the other slots filled, but would like to have volunteers for that. If you want to volunteer, please contact Nancy Silver or Rachel Cabellas. Both are here tonight. KI's Purim celebration will be Saturday evening, March 23rd. We'll be doing everything from the Megillah reading, our Purim spiel, a dinner by Chef Eric, games, and quite a bit more. Registration is required. Please go to our website or register through our weekly email. We'll also be sending out a special mailing for those who don't like email. Save the date of October. Save the date of April 26th for the 11th annual Super Shabbat Seder. Signups are now open on our website and available also through Let's Stay Connected email on Thursdays. At the conclusion of tonight's service, we'll take a 5-minute break and return and reconvene here in the sanctuary as Dr. Gordon leads us in what do we mean when we say Jew or Jewish. Those of you online, that's a 5-minute break. Not enough time for popcorn. Shabbat Shalom, and thank you for putting up with my mistakes this evening.
You're wonderful, Charlie. Thank you. Just a couple of, oh, look at that. Look, it's a couple extra notes. So first of all, I know that some of you are like, they start at 9 at B'rith Shalom, and you're worried because you think like maybe you don't have the bandwidth to be there from the very beginning of the service. I am told by the, the little birdie told me that 10 o'clock is a good time to come if you're not wanting to be there right at the very beginning. In addition, I wanted to just add an announcement because it's the rabbi's prerogative to do so. Anyone here from the Women of KI? Do you remember the date for the upcoming Seder that the Women of KI are planning with Bethel? It's April 9th. Okay, so everybody is welcome. It's a women's Seder, meaning it's about women's and women's experience, but it doesn't matter your gender if you want to join us. It's on a Tuesday. It's not during Passover. Please look out for announcements about it because we're really excited to get as many people as possible to join us for this special event. I will be leading it with Sherry Spark, and we're excited to have it be, once again, another joint synagogue event. What? And Chef Eric is catering. God, he never gets a break. April 2nd? He doesn't keep the calendar, he just cooks. We're going to continue with Aleinu, led by Z, on page 282, and it's my pleasure to call forward Professors Gordon to open the ark as we rise, page 282.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כרוצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו ההם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו עולים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני ושמו אחד.
You may be seated. Our thoughts now turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. We also remember the 6 million of our martyred brethren who perished in the Shoah, and all those who gave their lives in defense of Jewish ideals here in the United States, in Israel, and around the globe. Zichronam livracha. In a moment, I'm going to read the names of those for whom we're observing Yartzeit or Shloshim. And if I say the name of someone for whom you're saying Kaddish tonight, if you're comfortable doing so, we invite you to please rise and remain standing so that we might acknowledge your loss and offer you our support. We think of the family of Shirley Engelson, who was laid to rest just today. We also think of those whose families and dear ones are in Shloshim, the first 30 days of mourning. Lois Ratner and Tom Puklin. We also call to mind those whose yahrzeits occur this week. Jack Average, Leona Berger, Maxine Bourne, Eva Borofsky, Benjamin Cherney, thank you. Muriel Denny, Nathan Fenichel, Irving Friedman, Ellen Geist, Ned Greenberg, Judith Hoffman, Henry Kahn, Amy Cohn, Barbara Lubell, Sherry Metz, Jeanette Riebman, Mayra Rivera, Joseph Schmidt, Jonas Silverberg, Bessie Sinclair, Fanny Sinitsky, Jacob Stetcher, Joseph Weiner, Brett Weinstein, Jonathan Weiss, and Murray Wolski. I want to invite anyone who's here saying Kaddish for someone who'd like to add to this list the names of anyone for whom you're saying Kaddish this evening that we have not yet read. Zichronam livracha. May their memories be a blessing. We rise as one congregation and join in the words of Kaddish, page 294. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uvyomechon, v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, Ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam ula'omei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitrumam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shmei d'kudusha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran b'alma v'imru amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbah min Shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom imramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us, to all Israel and all the world, and comfort to all who are bereaved, as together we say, Amen. You may be seated. We're going to conclude this section of our evening with the song Od Yavo Shalom, which can be found on page 353. I hope you'll join in.
Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, ve'akulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, ve'akulam. Salam Aleinu ve'akol ha'olam. Salam, salam, salam Aleinu ve'akol ha'olam. Salam, salam. shalom aleinu, otivo shalom aleinu ve'akolam. Salam aleinu ve'akolam. Salam, salam, salam aleinu ve'akolam. Salam, salam. Otivo shalom aleinu, otivo shalom aleinu, otivo shalom aleinu ve'akolam.
Please rise for our closing benediction. From the center, eternal guide, you watch our steps as we move on diverse paths. The route is yours, the map is yours. Give us eyes to look beyond the next step, to search for the horizon. The scene is ours, the vista is yours. Give us ears to identify the passwords, to filter out the clamor. The message is ours, the code is yours. Give us hands to part the thicket, to push aside the undergrowth. The tree is ours, the forest is yours. Give us feet to hurry past confusion, to stride along straightaways, for we are the walkers, and you are guiding light. We are the explorers, and you, our native land. We are the travelers, and you are welcome home. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to take about 5 minutes for people to use the restroom, come get seated, and if you have a handout and you don't want it, we can recycle them. I don't believe you'll need your seat or room for this next part, but we're looking forward to everyone joining back in here in a moment. I forgot to say how amazing our choir is. Woo! Maybe she's watching. Okay, I know everybody could chat and chat. We will have an oneg. Yeah? Well, I'm glad you came. I'm glad you're doing it in a way that feels safe. I can't hear you. Good. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, you don't want that. Friends, we're going to gather back together. It's showtime. How many stragglers do you think we have in the bathroom? Oh, hello. Hi. That's very funny. I'm glad you're both here. Welcome. Thank you for the beautiful music. Yeah. You said yes. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So this is the first opportunity that Knesset Israel has had to bring in a scholar for our Scholar in Residence program during my tenure, and I'm really excited about it. So I wanted to just make sure that everybody is aware that this Scholar in Residence weekend is sponsored by the Congregation Knesset Israel Lifelong Learning Committee in cooperation with Congregation B'rith Shalom, and it is supported by the Ray and Bonnie Singer Community Education and Lecture Fund. Professor Lewis R. Gordon is a philosopher, political thinker, and educator who earned his PhD in philosophy with distinction from Yale University and his undergraduate degree in philosophy and political science from Lehman College, CUNY. He is currently Board of Trustees Distinguished Professor and Global Affairs and Department Head of Philosophy at the University of Connecticut at Storrs. He has also taught at Temple University and Brown University, where he created and led the Africana Studies Department. His many visiting appointments include philosophy and government at the University of the West Indies at Mona, Jamaica, and visiting professor at the University of Johannesburg. He is also the world's leading scholar in Black existentialism. Professor Gordon is also the founder of the Institute for the Study of Race and Critical Thought at Temple University. He was the founder for the founder of the Center for Afro-Jewish Studies at Temple University, the only such research center which focused on developing and providing reliable sources of information on African and African diasporic Jewish or Hebrew descended populations. The center organized conferences on Jewish diversity, collaborated with Jews of color organizations worldwide, and mentored doctoral students in the study of Afro-Jewish life and thought. Gordon also founded the Second Chance program at Lehman High School in the Bronx. That program was devoted to providing mentorship, creative pedagogy, curricula, and counseling for students in need to complete their high school diplomas. Professor Gordon's research includes work in, here we go, Africana philosophy, philosophy of existence, phenomenology, social and political philosophy, philosophy of culture, race and racism, aesthetics, philosophy of education, philosophy of science and technology, philosophy of human sciences, Jewish philosophy, global Southern philosophy, philosophy of medicine, psychiatry, and psychoanalysis, and decoloniality. As a public intellectual, Professor Gordon has written for a variety of political forums, newspapers, and magazines, and has lectured and organized workshops and political meetings across the globe. Lewis doesn't just teach philosophy. He doesn't just do philosophy. He lives philosophy. In the classroom, in the coffee shop, in the kitchen, and behind a drum kit, everything Lewis does is imbued with philosophical imagination, driven by intellectual curiosity and a drive to make the world better. He's the author, co-author, or editor of 18 books, including, most recently, Fear of a Black Consciousness from 2022, and Freedom, Justice, and Decoloniality from 2021. He has authored over 500 articles, book chapters, and book reviews. Past president and founding member of the Caribbean Philosophical Association, Professor Gordon was born in Jamaica and grew up in the Bronx. Lewis is an accomplished jazz musician and a stellar chef. He is not the only exceptional talent in his family. His wife, Jane Gordon, is professor of political science at UConn. Their daughter, Sula Gordon, is an artist, and their son, Elijah Gordon, a musician and filmmaker. Jane and Lewis are also parents of Jenny and Matthew. It is my great pleasure to join our Adult Education Committee, our KI membership, and the members of Bris Shalom in bringing Louis Ricardo Gordon to engage us in deep learning throughout this weekend. Please join me in welcoming Professor Gordon.
That is for you. Yeah.
I always begin by feeling, especially the sounds. It connects us. As many of you know, all of humanity is connected by something primordial. Our mother's heartbeat. It synchronizes us into the world, connects us, enables us to communicate. I begin with saying what I'm grateful for. First, I'm grateful to be able to open my eyes each day and look into the eyes of my wife, Jane. And whenever I look into her eyes, I see our children, and I see the day not only we met, but also I think about the many things we do together. I'm also grateful when I do open my eyes about what it is to live in a world of love. Because you see, hate, as we know, destroys. Hate is also easy. It gives you a quick response. But love is something very different. When I think about love, love requires hard work. It requires building, growing. It requires something that's already at heart in what is actually in the meaning of the term Israel, to wrestle with God. That question of love is what connects and enables so many of us to reach a point where there are things, despite all of the hate, all of the suffering, there are those moments, even within it, that we're able to find our humanity through acts of love. And I'm grateful for the fact that you have invited me to this community and that you are here in that act of love, because ultimately part of loving is learning. And I've found so many opportunities for that. When I think, for instance, about, I can't believe it, it's 28 years ago that I met David Fryer. And I met Jane. And over those years, one of the things you would realize, at least I realize, is that you see, there are people you could meet in passing. But there are people, when you meet them, there's an opening, a possibility. And as the time goes by, there's certain things you learn. For instance, when I think about what it is, I'm this thing called a professor. Whenever I teach my classes, I often begin my classes with a conversation with my students about what a professor is. And students are really funny. Students always think professors are people who know everything. They think professors are Moses with the tablets. And after they go and they say their various things, I usually come back and say, well, you know what? What I see a professor as is a person who fell in love with learning, and fell in love with learning so much that we continue to learn and learn even if we have to teach ourselves. And all students are beginning learners that we hope can fall in love with learning. Everybody who is taught has learned something from their students because their students bring their unique experiences to the learning moment. But already at the heart of the way I'm talking about learning is also love. You see? And this tells you something because you see, when we meet in the process of learning, we're also going through the ongoing repetition of acts of loving. So over the years, I've been rather fortunate to have learned a lot from David Fryer in many ways, because even though I've written quite a few books, if you go and look in those books, only the ones before I met him and before he published his work are the ones without his name in them. So there are people who could tell you that you're important, but it's much better for them not to tell you and just show it. That understanding of learning is I'm bringing up because of how delighted I am to be here. Because over the years, I got to see the various acts of learning and love that are exemplified in David's life. It was so wonderful to be here as I hear Soshi in action, right? But I got to tell you, over the years too, with Ellie, Ezra, and how overjoyed we were at Ellie's bat mitzvah celebrations to get to meet Shoshana, and then to have the good fortune tonight to sit down and get to meet Eliyahu or Elijah and Ruth. It was great to get to meet also as we got to talk a little about music. And in the midst of it, we get to see the affirmation of a celebration of life. And we need that affirmation right now because you see there are lots of things. And tonight it's an introduction. I'm here over the weekend, but I just want to begin with that mainly because, as we know, right now there's a form of dismembering of the human world, a fragmenting. And a lot of that is connected to certain basic confusions that many people miss. Because you see, the first thing to bear in mind is that there's no such thing as a human life without conflict. But you see, there are conflicts that can make us grow. When you are committed to coexisting, you are in a conflict out of love that will make you stronger in your relationships. I remember I was one day walking into a lounge and there was a student, a doctoral student, who was, right now the world's in a lot of conflicts, and he was talking about it, and I said, there's a difference between conflict and war. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, this was a married student. I said, you're married, right? He said, yeah. I said, well, has your marriage had conflicts? He said, absolutely. He said, but think about how different that would be if in your conflict with your spouse, you thought of your spouse as the enemy. And when I said that, he shuddered. The very idea, because he knew what that meant. When you make people into the enemy, it's about eliminating them. But of course, for him, life without his beloved is not life at all. But I tell a second story, and then I'll get into those fallacies that are brought up. The second story is of a woman a teenage woman by the name of Yvonne Patricia Solomon. That woman had a child whom the physicians informed her was so ill. This was in 1962, so ill that he would not live longer than 2 weeks. Distraught, she thought she would take that child home anyway, and rather than leaving the child in the hospital. She took the child home to her grandparents. Now, the grandparents had a lot of daughters. So the moment that baby was put down, another would pick it up. And in the midst of constantly picking up, you know what happens if you're going to bring a baby home in a place with a lot of daughters, and it's going to be, oh, look at the baby, look at the baby. We're going to pick up a baby, that's the next baby, baby. And in the midst of all of these activities with the baby, this woman's mother, who was living in the Bahamas, came also because she was prepared for a funeral. But then 2 weeks went by. Then a month. Then 2 months. And then at 3 months, the child began to speak. So the child's grandmother went to the mother and said, I don't think this child's dying soon. Now, the child was very sickly and life, many illnesses. They have affected his eyes, blood, so forth. But for some reason, that child is now 61 years old and is speaking before this congregation. What in the world kept that child alive? And there are many things we can put, because I also write on science. But wow, love is powerful, isn't it? The love of that community, the constant affirmation of life, is something that sometimes we underestimate. And it's not that it always has the outcome we're looking for, but it's important for us to understand what our commitments are. And those commitments are such that always where you find love, it's very important to value it. Now, it's rather striking that the parsha for this is Pekudei. Because the title, of course, what is a Jew? What do we think about Jews? And what's striking, of course, is also right now, as we think about our beloved planet as well, because there are a lot of things we're talking about: gold, copper, silver, nickel, and all of that is talked about there. But in addition, it's about a community getting together and building and creating a tabernacle. And within that framework, those many communities, we have a sense, because at that time, there were Israelites. But among them was an Israelite called Judah. And this is crucial because today, the way many of us connect with the ancient Israelites is through historical events that would take too much time for me to explain, that mediate through a place where Judah became a place also called Judea, and the complicated story of what happened to Judeans and their transformation into the people we know as Jews. But you see, that's very internal. But within that framework, there are certain ways in which, when we try to talk about ourselves as Jews, there are certain things over the centuries that have got in the way of how we meet or encounter one another as a people. These are ways that do a form of damage in making us fail to see one another. But it's not only among ourselves, but also external to ourselves. There are ways in which what's forced on us is a misrepresentation of who or what we are. I'll give you an example. One time, and Jane was a witness to this, one time I was in Brazil. And when I was in Brazil, I was in Salvador, Brazil, I was giving a lecture. And when I was giving the lecture, I mentioned being Jewish, and it was like, you know, those hip-hop parties where suddenly you are, and the people are like, what are you talking about? And then I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, we don't see many Jews, they said, and we definitely don't see many who look like you. So I said, really? They said, well, will you talk more about it? I said, how about if I come back in 3 days and I have a conversation with you all about Jews, because I was there to talk about something very academic. They said, cool. So Jane and I and our children, who were very little then, went out in the streets of Brazil, and I turned on my superpower. It's my Judar. You all ever heard of Judar? Now, this is not, just for full disclosure, this is not an essentialistic claim, okay? I'm not talking about some Jewish essence in people. Judar is something that we all develop when we carry our identity as Jews with us. You know, and we do this not just about being Jewish. There are many other ways. There are times, for instance, people turn on their queer dar. People turn on their black dar. They turn on their whatever dar, because even if people don't look it, there's a little something that gives you a clue, you know? So I went out in the streets of Salvador, Brazil, and very brazenly would turn on my Judar and walk up to people and say, yo, you Jewish? And they were like, yeah. And they were so happy to be identified, which already tells you something different from the United States, because the United States try to tell you to hide your identity. But these folks were so happy. They were like, yeah. Even when we went to a tram system, there was a dark-skinned black woman wearing white, and I'm buying a ticket, and I looked at her, I was like, you Jewish? And she smiled, and she took out her Magen David. Right? So when I went back to speak, I said, yo, for a place with no Jews, there are a lot of Jews in Salvador, Brazil. And in fact, the history nearby, we went to a place called Cachoeira. And if you go to Cachoeira, Brazil, there's a street now called Broad Street. It was changed to Goat Street originally. But before that, it had another name before Goat Street. And you probably know it's coming. The name of it was Jew Street. Okay? So this already tells you something to open up this point. Okay? Because you see, there are certain, when the very idea of like a fallacy, you know what a fallacy is? It's a faulty kind of reasoning that leads you to false beliefs, okay? There are very specific fallacies that come about when we talk about Jews, okay? And to give you an example, first of all, it's cool to be around here. A lot of folks ask, have you been around here before? Jane and I taught at Temple for a decade. When we were there, yes, I created the Center for Afro-Jewish Studies. I remember when the center was there, because you know, when you create a Center for Afro-Jewish Studies, there are these people who pop up called reporters, okay? And reporters will take notes and ask you certain questions. And among them, they would say, so you have a Center for the Study of Blacks and Jews? And I'd say, no, I'm referring to black Jews. And then they would say, well, why black Jews? Why not just, Jews? I said, actually, it actually is a center for Jews in our full diversity. It's just that if I said diversity of Jews, you know what most people would think. Oh, okay, you're going to talk about Ashkenazi, Sephardic. Or some people, if they, and then they may even say they're going to throw in some converts, that kind of a thing. So I said, no. I wanted to give it a title that compelled people to ask questions. And in the context of the United States, particularly if you're in Philly, it was healthy that these reporters popped up because it became a learning moment. You see, sometimes we get frustrated or upset sometimes, but sometimes it's an opportunity for people to learn. So as we began to talk, they began to learn some of the cool things about having a Center for Afro-Jewish Studies. And one of the cool things, particularly if you found a center in 2005 when we founded it, there was this other phenomenon called websites. And we had all these plans to go out and study different Jewish communities. But once you have a website and you put Center for Afro-Jewish Studies, everybody starts to write you with their stories. They start sharing with you. And in that process, it itself became a learning situation. And before you know it, not only was I getting piles and piles of Jewish stories, but also because in the nature of the work I do, I travel all over the globe. And I got to tell you something. There was one year I did 200 flights. Everywhere I've gone, there are only two places I've not been on this planet: Greenland and Antarctica. But I'm absolutely sure if I go there, I'm going to meet Jews. Okay? We may be a tiny population, but we're everywhere. So within that context of talking about Jews, I began to realize that there were certain fallacies that also converged if I talk about blacks and I talk about Jews, and you bring them together with black Jews. Okay? And the first fallacy I want to bring up requires us asking ourselves honestly, what does it mean to be normal? Because you see there, that response, initially, there's so many Jewish communities who are put in an abnormal situation when behaving normally. Part of the history of misrepresentation of Jewish people is for doing normal things. You see? For instance, I was a Jewish person doing a normal thing as a professor speaking in Brazil. However, it became an abnormal situation, and if I'd given an abnormal response, which is to be defensive, you see what I'm saying, and so forth, it would have been a missed learning opportunity. Okay? And I'll give you another example about how we could deal with the normal and the abnormal. Here's, for me, a normal situation. Back in 2010, I was the keynote speaker for the Caribbean and Latin American Jewish Association. It met in Jamaica, right? Now already, many of you never heard of a Caribbean and Latin American Jewish Association. It's been in existence for decades. But here's the thing, I went, gave my talk, we went to the remaining, there are now 2 shuls in Jamaica, but at the time there's one remaining one. There used to be 13, but there's now 1. We went there, did the whole thing, everything's great. Didn't think anything about it. Everybody took pictures, didn't think anything about it. Then, many years later, I was speaking at the American Jewish Association in Boston, in the United States. I went there, and as I looked around, something occurred to me. Because you see, even though I just said when I met in the one in Jamaica, many of you may have in your minds images of what those Jews look like. Now, here's the thing, my family consists of Jews who are from Shannon, Ireland. They were Sephardic Jews from Shannon, Ireland. Jews who were from Jerusalem in the 19th century, and those Jews identified as a combination of not only people from Jerusalem, but cousins in Egypt, Syria, and Ethiopia. Okay? And then I'm in Jamaica, where I see my family. So I'm able to see people in a way that's not superficial. You see? And then when I went with my wife, there's now the Ashkenazi Jewish community mediated by South Africa. So when our entire family get together, you see Jews from the lightest to the darkest, many kinds. However, when I was in Boston, something struck me. What struck me was, of course, only about 2% of the people in Boston, morphologically, skin color-wise, look like me. Now, there are people who would respond to that as if it were something odd. But you see, when I was in Jamaica, about 2% of the population in that Caribbean and Latin America meeting looked like the majority of people in Boston. You see my point? Those two examples are absolutely normal. Because in North America, 95% of Jewish people are from people who migrated from Northern Europe. What in the world are they supposed to look like? And similarly, if you're in the Caribbean and Latin America, or if you're across the continent of Africa, a lot of Jews there are people who have a longer history in East Africa and West Asia. When I'm in Cochin in India, for a person who can't see the internal part, they look like East Indian Jews. When I meet Kaifeng Jews, they look to people like Chinese. I should say my paternal side is Chinese. I need to add that. So I grew up, when I was a child, my initial language was also in Cantonese. So when I meet Kaifeng Jews, there's a way, it was frustrating. People always wonder what's up because they see this black kid and people refer to someone as Chinese. I'm like, that's not Chinese, that's Japanese. They say, oh, no. Well, that Chinese, no, that's Korean. Now, and they're like, where are you from? But here's the thing. It's not that, but it's not always that essential. Sometimes people make mistakes, even internal to communities. But here's the thing. The thing is that very normal thing, the history of how people move, people often forget. You see? But there's even something even funnier. Because you see, remember I talked about that Judar? There are times when I've looked at pictures in my house over the years. I've seen pictures, for instance, of David, who's here. And by the way, we have similar illnesses, which is rather interesting. Through our Jewish side, it's rather interesting. Genetics test for us, David, right? But there was one time I was also with a Lemba Jew from South Africa, a Sephardic Jew from Bulgaria, right? I was with a person who was from New Jersey. And although we took a picture, and I thought it was very odd, because the only difference between the four of us was just tones. We had the same hairlines, the this, the that, everything. We wrote each other over the years, same illnesses. And this tells you something, you see? Because when people identify with a community, they begin to connect in ways that internal to the community sometimes is overlooked. You all have invited friends over to check out your family, and you ever notice they always say the same thing? You invite friends over, hey, come meet my family. You know what they say? Man, you all look alike. And what do family members always say? No, I don't look like that, right? But what that tells you is that ability to see simultaneously your similarity and your difference. Because if somebody were to come in and say, nah, you all look alike, you can't be related, then you start the opposite fight. What are you talking about, right? Like even my sons used to like always, sons at a certain point like to diss dad, yo dad, blah, blah. But don't tell them they don't look like me, right? They get pissed off. But then when you say, wow, you all look alike, then they're like, no, right? So we start with certain fallacies. The obvious what I just began with, right? The fallacy about what we think is normal. The thing that's crucial to bear in mind, and this is something that's connected to the opening remark about love and commitment, is that in both places, when I was in Boston and when I was in Kingston, Jamaica, both communities kept talking about how to make their community more diverse. That already tells you something, right? Because although it is normal that the majority of Jews in North America are from people who migrated from Europe, and the majority of Jews in the Caribbean and South America are from people from Iberia, North Africa, East Africa, and those places. They are concerned, nevertheless, it's an ethos, it's a question that's called upon us to ask, who are we leaving out? You see what I'm getting at? So even if you tried your absolute best in North America, the reality is you may get your numbers a little bigger, but nevertheless, the commitment is exemplifying something about being Jewish that we have to ask. And this is actually interestingly connected to David's work, because David studied Levinas. He studied the question of the ethical obligation to another. And this question of thinking about another is what makes the fallacies egregious. So the second fallacy, I'm just going to go through them quickly because we have a short time. The second one is the notion of physical purity. You ever notice some people talk about Jews like they're pure Jews? But honestly, what in the world is a pure Jew? Do you see what I'm getting at? Now, of course, people are running around for genetics tests and stuff, and they could say, hey, I got 3%, you got 2%. But, what about the other 97? I mean, right? But this purity stuff is very strange, especially because if you think about Judaism, there's a reason we're not supposed to name God. There's a reason that we're not supposed to have idols. Purity is an idol. Because what it does is it erases that element of what we bring to our relationships that enable us to grow. Okay? It's connected to that humility in what I mentioned, learning from students, not just teaching. You see? But the purity part is even more, but the purity part also contains historical lies. Here's an historical lie. An historical lie is connected to migration. And here's the lie, that people can migrate without changing. Right? Now, there's one thing every single one of you know in this room, especially because we're in the United States of America, is Jewish people move around a lot. Right? Do you know any Jewish community that is not a migrating community of some kind? Just constantly moving around. So we lie to ourselves when we imagine that people can move without change. And this is something paradoxical, because change doesn't mean elimination. Change could also mean growth. The entire San Francisco Jewish community was founded by males. Yeah. They went out there during the gold rush. One of them was Levi Jeans. But of course, there's a reason they were founded by males. Many Jewish communities, until very recently where you could go on a plane as a woman, this is why gender is important to talk about when you talk about migration and Jewish identity. There was a time where to travel as a person identified as a woman was extraordinarily dangerous. You would be enslaved. So many communities were founded by males who formed minions and married local women who they converted. So by the time it was safe, suddenly people show up and there are whole Jewish communities there. This happened not only in a place like San Francisco, it happened all over the world, everywhere I've gone, everywhere. It happened all over the African continent, over Asia, South America, etc. Okay? If we think about this, how it makes sense, then this becomes something very important. Because you see, as we know, especially when we talk about halakha, these are Jewish communities, but they also bring to Jewish people a diversity and vibrancy. So the main thing is it's bizarre that there are people, when they meet Jewish communities, imagine that the people they're seeing are going to look exactly like people from 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, etc. Makes no sense. But this now brings us to the third. The third is, and this is something I see a lot with blacks as well. Everywhere I go, people believe their Jews are the Jews. The same way they believe their blacks are the blacks. I write a lot. You know, I have to explain to most people that US black people are only some black people. The largest black populations are in Central and South America in terms of the New World. And of course, there's this place called Africa. A lot of black people there, I hear. But similarly, a lot of people don't understand that their Jews are not the Jews. I remember my first time in Eastern Europe. The first time I went to Eastern Europe, I went to Prague. I've been all over Eastern Europe now, but first time I was in Prague. And here's the thing. I grew up in the Bronx, right? I was born in Jamaica. By the time we migrated, I was 9 years old, in the Bronx. When I was in Prague, I would swear I was on Grand Concourse in the Bronx. And at that moment, it was a revelation to me because, you see, when I was in Jamaica, the Jewish people I knew were Jamaican Jews. So when I first came here, and I began to see people who I could see certain ways were similar, but their ways were very different, I was trying to learn this, but there are a lot of things they did that was so different that I thought those were Jewish things. And then when I went to Prague, there were all these Christians doing the same thing. And I said, oh, it's not that those specific things are Jewish. It's that those specific Jews are Eastern European. And what they did was to transform things there into Jewish things. That's a Jewish superpower. We can there are a lot of things in Jewish history that's not historically Jewish, but we made them Jewish. Stepping up the glass at a wedding, that was not historically so. And sorry, everybody, I got to break it to you. I know this is hard. I know this is very hard. But it wasn't historically Jewish. This thing wasn't. Chicken soup. I know. Because chicken didn't really work its way through. It's from Southeast Asia. Chicken didn't work its way through until relations with China and getting things back. And before people were eating duck, whatever other kind of bird they could have. And then they were like, but boy, that chicken's good. And before you know it, we created Jewish penicillin, right? But the point is we made it Jewish. It met all the criteria of kashrut, we made it Jewish. So this thing then, what was eye-opening there is that, of course, everywhere, there's this concept called creolization. And my wife Jane has written a lot on it. Creolization is when an excluded group is able to relate in such a way to create something new while affirming their identity. You see? Creolization is all over the place. It is so powerful, in fact, that even if you go and look at writings in antiquity, right? Seneca, particularly, one of the Roman philosophers and politicians, was so upset about this because they went to dominate these Judeans, and then suddenly the Romans were practicing Shabbat, right? And at that moment, you know, those early Jews were like, yeah, I know, we got powerful stuff, right? But the thing is, the thing for us to remember is that each community, as they are living and growing, are going to create their Jews. That's the point. And their Jews are Jews because of the openness and capacity of what we offer when we think about the ethical dimension of being Jewish. Now, there are lots of other more specific scholarly things, but that would take up too much time. I want to go to just two, because I'm with you over the weekend, and we can get to talk more, okay? One of them is that I already brought up migration. If you go and look all across the African continent, all of the trade routes had Jews on them, every single one. I've gone and seen Jewish communities that go back 1,500 years, 1,200 years, etc. In South Africa, a lot of people, everywhere I go, I look at the local Jewish museum. Many of them have false stories. In South Africa, it said Jews came in the 1890s to South Africa. Absolutely false. Jews have been in South Africa for 1,000 years. It's just that those Jews, who were Yemeni Jews, eventually became those Zimbabwean and South African Jews that we call the Lemba. Now, here's the thing. So trade, connecting, etc. There are two things we need to think about. The first one, of course, is we also need to get rid of the abnormalizing of Jewish people by looking at ourselves exclusively in terms of our degradation. It is very important to think about what is good about Jewish life, the affirmative elements of it, what makes it positive, so positive that their people, even at risk of their life, would become Jewish people. Now, this happens when Jewish people travel. So the last two, one of them is something that people don't want to talk about today, which is colonialism. Because you see, colonialism has played a very important part in Jewish history. In fact, the very story of Hanukkah is about a story of what colonialism was doing and how fighting against colonialism transformed a people. If you want to look into it, look at a book by Shia Cohen called The Beginnings of Jewishness. There are many books, but that's one of them. But similarly, the whole situation of Adrian, the Roman emperor, destroying the Second Temple, raised for Judean people question that all colonized people ask, which is, whose laws are you going to follow? And as we know, had a decision been made to look at Jewish identity in a rigid way, we might have died out a long time ago. But instead, something happened that created what we call Rabbinic Judaism. And Rabbinic Judaism created a way that began to transform things. For instance, instead of being patrilineal, it shifted to matrilineality. There are lots of other concepts that began to think through beyond 613 commandments. And within that, the concept of mitzvot, the concept of tikkun olam, lots of concepts began to bring the positivity in which we begin to understand that liberation, right, which is the story, for instance, of going out of, at that time it was Kemet, but people later call it Egypt, is only the beginning of a story. Because you see, when you're liberated, you have escaped shackles, enslavement. But to be free, you must ask what kind of people you want to become, what kind of life you want to have. And this is where the question of being a Jew gets into the ethical dimension. back to the wrestling with God, the Israel element. Because many people are perplexed by this, but it's very existential. And that is, even if you're born a Jew, you still got to spend the rest of your life becoming one. That's the reason we're here, isn't it? In other words, people come up and say, yo, I want to be Jew. You're like, well, it's not going to be that easy. You got a lot of work to do. So I close with something from that's connected to these fallacies in an interesting way, from a Jewish thinker I love. There are many Jewish thinkers I love, but I love this man for a variety of reasons. And it was very strange that for about 3 years I hadn't taught his work. But this year I decided I must teach him, okay? And his name is Martin Buber. Now let me tell you, I'm teaching this course called Global Existentialism. I begin the course 4,000 years ago. We read through ideas from people from ancient Egypt all the way. We read through ideas from Ethiopia, from ideas from India. We go through Japanese thought and so forth. And then we're going along, and then the week came for Buber. Now, you know, these are young people, you know, this is a class, it's 325 students. These are first year of university undergraduates, and I'm going to teach them Buber. So I started my Buber story, okay? But I started my Buber story first by summarizing his life, but then getting to a story about a friend of mine by the name of Paget Henry, whom David knows, who was a professor at Brown. He was not Jewish. He was a Christian fellow who had wanted to become a Methodist minister. But Paget Henry and his cousin loved to go swimming at the beach all the time, so they were missing classes when they were kids. And they got caught because they were lying they were going to the library, but when their parents went to the library, they didn't see them, they were in trouble, so he thought he had to go to the library. Now, it'll take me too long to tell you into this, but let me tell you, if you ever get a chance to go to Antigua and go to the beach, do it. If you see those beaches, you would understand why those boys were not in class. Anyway, so he went to the library and he started reading philosophical books, and we're reading books like Bertrand Russell's Why I'm Not a Christian, and he declared himself an atheist. Years later, he came to New York and was at City College. And at City College, when he landed there and he saw the treatment of blacks in this country, he wanted to study physics. He decided to study sociology. And then while he was there, he was active, he was an activist, etc. His cousin, a friend of his, showed up with tickets to the World Fair in the early 60s, okay? So they got tickets to the World Fair, and as they're going, at the edge of his eye, he saw this room with a small group of students circling an old man with a beard. And he had tickets to the World Fair, but he told his friend, you know, he's curious. So he goes in the room, and he starts arguing with the old man. He's giving every argument he had for the non-existence of God. And the old man gently just listened to him, and they talked, and this goes on for hours. And what Paget Henry said to me was, this man seemed to know something I don't know. And yes, the man was Buber, Martin Buber. Now, the thing about Buber, why Buber is important, is that Buber had this concept called an encounter. And in the encounter, you meet another, not as an it, not as a thing, but as a thou, as a you. The thing that Martin Buber was doing was living the idea of meeting, even with the hostility of Paget's behavior, he was meeting him as a you, a human being. And that human encounter affected Paget Henry so much that he went from then on to think through the spiritual importance of embracing your fellow human being. Of course, Buber asked a profound question. What is God's relationship to all of reality, even to this, some people may call it a podium, but some people may call it a thing. Or if we think about the bema, we think about, could you imagine if somebody walked up and started kicking the piano? Now, at first, some of you may say, why are you doing that? What did the piano do to you? And if the person say, it's just a piano, it's a thing, it's an it. What Buber would say, no, at that moment you could see, even in so-called it, that the piano doesn't deserve to be treated that way. Because all of reality for God is you. What is that relationship but what I started off with? Which is the insight of love. Now, the reason I bring this up is because those young people, I'm not kidding, as I taught Buber, I figured I'd teach Buber, those young people, most of whom were not Jewish, they did the coolest thing. They went, I was like, I got the snaps. They were snapping to Buber. But they were also snapping to something very fundamental that we all need today. And that is the radicality of the encounter that is also part of the message of what the ethical obligation, the good, the beauty of what we understand ourselves as when we talk about being Jewish and a Jewish life. And that doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. I make a lot of mistakes, right? It's one of the reasons I don't read something when I speak is connected to the fact that from dyslexia to other things, I have to prepare in a different way. But that's different kind. But there are also other mistakes. It's mistakes that we talk about at Yom Kippur, or Yom Kippur, as some would say it. When we talk about our accountability for one another. So within that framework of accountability, when we understand our Jewishness, we should understand that we should give room to learn from our mistakes, how to build the broader connection of who we are. And in doing that, we can encounter one another always in such a way that as we say with Shalom, we are also saying we're wishing our relationship to be whole, beautiful, to see and to hear one another with the gift of love. Thank you. It's fine.
Yeah. Does anybody have any follow-up questions? We could have questions for later in the weekend. That's okay too. Yes, please.
Can we teach our children what we want, and then they have their own children?
Could you please say your name? Joy. That's a great name, Joy. No. You know, it's funny. In my psychoanalytical writings, I write on joy, the importance of joy. A lot of people confuse pleasure with joy. But joy is an adult sensibility that's connected to your question, right? The question, of course, when I did that tapping, or even when we meet, we're also connecting with ancestors. But in order for there to be ancestors, there have to be descendants. But the thing about descendants, some of us get to meet some of them, which brings, of course, joy. But some of us have not met them yet, and they need not be biological. You see? They also could be people who are not at all identical with us. But the thing is, I do think the best way is to, you know that point I made about showing instead of telling? I do think the best way, ultimately, is to live the kind of life that you would like them to live. It's amazing, I'm finding, when I go and meet people who know our children when we're not around. And a lot of the things that they seem to not want when they're around us, they absolutely value and do. Because they see us live it. They see how valuable it's a source of joy for them. You see? I do think in the end that the best teaching is ultimately by example. And that ultimately it should not be didactic. It should be the process of Shema, right? The process of hearing and learning. You see? And give ourselves room. That's why I opened up with talking about, try to think about what is normal, because sometimes we beat ourselves up in such a way that we fail to address what is abnormal. You see? And what is abnormal is to build ourselves on hate or constantly fetishize our errors. It's normal to embrace our humanity, because ultimately we need to remember we're not God. But of course, the allegory of Torah, when we do open the ark and carry it, is that we take responsibility for it.
Thank you. Yes, Bob.
Briefly, could you try to build a bridge as to how does love bring us to self-actualization?
Well, I do think, sure, just quickly. We'll talk about it over the weekend, but the short version is, I think, connected to the point about Buber. I do think it's when we don't think of actualization as being complete, but actualization as an ongoing project and journey. That's a short answer.
I think we're going to maybe bring it here. Let's, once again, thank you.
Okay. Shabbat Shalom.